A Winter's Kill by J.K. Elam, read by Norma Jean Gradsky. Chapter 1. He paused and sniffed the air. There was something there, subtle but distinct. A fragrant scent had separated itself from the other smells and now rode a cold breeze towards him. He stood amongst a myriad of white pine trees, their branches caked and heavy, the snow ankle-deep. Petals of white drifted gently from the dull, muted sky above. The sun just a watery haze. The forest silent and still. He turned his head. His nostrils flared. He sniffed the air again, trying to pinpoint its source. He was standing downwind. The scent teased him, like the invisible caress of a past lover, their lingering smell on your skin and in your memory, long after the sex had ended. He stood perfectly still, contemplating what to do next. Then it was gone, carried away on the breeze. Nothing there now. He shook his head, clearing his mind, shaking off the distraction, and focusing back on the task at hand. A wide tree trunk was directly in front of him, a huge eastern white pine, as old as the forest itself. Redness was seeping around its base, warm liquid feeding the root ball, crimson on a field of blinding white. Reaching out, he twisted, pulled, wrenched, tearing flesh, ripping muscle, splintering bone. Finally, 20 inches of carbon shaft came away in his gloved hand. She didn't want to give up the bolt easily. This one must have nicked a rib on the way in before lodging behind the bone itself and the blades snapping open. All his kills were at less than 30 yards, so he chose mechanical broadheads. They maintained their kinetic energy in flight, offered a wider wound channel and a shorter blood trail, while still making it a quick kill. It was ironic that the hunting magazines considered it too harsh, too raw to describe it like that. So they used the term fast expiration, whereas in fact what they really meant was a quick kill. He took a few moments to examine the bolt, making sure it wasn't damaged. For him it was as much about the end result as it was about perfecting the mechanics of the kill. Just as a dedicated sporting shooter studied the penetration depths, trajectory lines, and expansion patterns of bullets in ballistic gel, he studied the devastating impact his weaponry had on human flesh and bone. There was, however, no practice. Humans were his practice. Ribbons of flesh clung from the broadhead, and part of the mossy oak finish on the shaft was coated with blood, thick and slippery. He'd used slightly heavier bolts this time, preferring penetration over speed. Satisfied, he wiped it clean with a rag and fixed it back into his quiver, then berated himself for getting carried away. It was the first kill of the season, after all. He looked up and regarded her as she hung there, limp, head down, straw-colored hair covering her face, droopy like a rag doll. The first 3 shots were just for fun, pinning her to the tree like an insect to a corkboard, 1 bolt through each lung, the 3rd through her throat and out the back of her neck, burrowing deep into the rough bark behind her head. Then he took his time and watched her slowly suffer and slowly die. He took out his thermos from his backpack and drank some coffee while she withered and gasped, all wide-eyed, crimson bubbles slowly forming on her lips, her chest cavity making sucking noises. After his 2nd cup of coffee, he'd seen enough. The last bolt finally killed her, a heart shot, the bolt passing left of the sternum in between the costal cartilage of the 5th and 6th rib. Slowly and carefully, he packed up his gear. The snow around him resembled the floor of an ER theater, mushy and red. If her parents were lucky, the authorities would find her in a day or 2. If not, then the wildlife would have something to keep them fed during the long winter months. All summer long he'd been hibernating, just like the bears do in winter, working hard at his job head down, tail up, long hours, little sleep, countless demands placed on his skills and expertise. People depended on him, trusted him, never questioning. An elevated position of authority and standing in the community granted him that luxury. He liked not being questioned. That was important to him. During the fall, he spent his months preparing, getting ready, making sure this season would be his best ever. He spent weeks poring over maps, searching for a new hunting ground, one that best suited his tastes and the risks he was willing to take. He needed a new field to plow and sow, a new location to harvest his crop, preferring to only spend one season in the same place before moving on to the next. Less chance of getting caught or leaving a trail for others to follow. Familiarity within a small town often led to sloppiness or recognition. Townsfolk would remember a face from last year, maybe the make and model of a car, or the numbers and letters of a license plate. These small details seemed to stick in people's minds in small towns, perhaps because nothing much else happened that was worthy of noting. The pace was slower, the texture of daily life more distinct compared to life in the city. But it was a risk he was willing to take. It heightened the experience, the thrill. Everything was planned and calculated out to cover every possible contingency, even fleeing the town quickly if needed. It was a long trek back through the forest to where he had parked. The hood and roof of his car was covered with a light dusting of snow. He lowered the tailgate and threw his backpack and crossbow inside, covering everything with an old tarp. He climbed in, started the engine, and hit the gas. The tread of the wheels slipped, then gripped solid ground, throwing up tufts of snow and frozen mud as he drove off. Moments later, he turned off the woodland dirt road and back onto the main highway into town. The car was a rental, they all were, a Jeep Wrangler fitted with big, meaty winter tires that made light work of the snow and icy slush. By the time he'd finished with the car and had left town, it would be driven far away by someone else, to another town or city. Another layer of DNA and other trace evidence would be added to the concoction already inside. The laziness of cleaning a car properly between rentals was his good fortune. It made his vacation less worrisome. 10 minutes later, a sign appeared on the side of the highway. "Welcome to Willow Falls, Iowa, Fields of Opportunities." He smiled as he drove past. Can't argue with that, he thought to himself. If you enjoyed this sample of the thriller book, A Winter's Kill by J.K. Elam, then click on the link below to purchase the ebook.